Welcome to Global Truth. This is your host, Dr. Nasir Baig. If you have looked up at the sky anywhere across the northeastern United States or southern Canada over the last week or so, you have probably felt that creeping, unsettling sense of dread. A thick, heavy, yellow-gray haze hanging over your cities. A midday sun transformed into a glowing blood-orange orb suspended in a bruised sky. Right now, in mid-July 2026, Canada is in the grip of an escalating and deeply concerning wildfire season. Across the country, roughly 850 wildfires are actively burning. Over 140 of those blazes are concentrated right in northwestern Ontario. The smoke has traveled thousands of miles on upper-level winds. It has blanketed Toronto, pushing its air quality index into the hazardous zone, hovering between 200 and 250, and rolled down the US eastern seaboard, plunging cities from Minneapolis to Boston and New York into a surreal, choking twilight. It's hard not to feel a sense of apocalyptic history repeating itself. Think back to Edvard Munch, his famous 1893 painting, The Scream. For years, scientists and art historians have pointed out that the terrifying wavy orange sky in the background wasn't just an expressionist vision. In fact, Munch was painting a vivid memory of the global atmospheric aftermath of the 1883 eruption of Mount Krakatoa. That volcano spewed so much ash into the stratosphere that it caused a year without a summer across Europe. Today, the skies are turning orange not from a volcanic eruption, but from an environmental crisis of our own making. So, how did we get back to this point? Let's break down the facts. The 2026 Canadian wildfire season actually started on a relatively quiet note. Coming off the back of the catastrophic, record-shattering 5 years of 2023 and 2025, winter and early spring gave northern communities a temporary reprieve. But by late June, the pattern broke. Early heat waves combined with multi-week droughts to dry out the boreal forest floor, turning decades of moss and pine needles into a massive tinderbox. According to the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, roughly 2.8 million hectares, nearly 7 million acres, have been scorched so far this year across 8 provinces and 2 territories. How are these massive fires actually starting? While human activity accounts for some ignitions, nature provides the biggest spark through lightning. In vast wilderness areas like Wood Buffalo National Park, a single dry thunderstorm can ignite dozens of uncontrolled fires simultaneously. In a dry thunderstorm, lightning strikes the dry canopy, but the surrounding air is so hot and parched that any accompanying rain evaporates before ever touching the ground. And then there's the hidden culprit, holdover fires, often called the zombie fires. These are holdovers from the previous year's fire season. They burn slowly and silently underground in the organic peat layers all winter long, insulating from the freezing cold by snow. When spring comes, the snow melts and the summer sun bakes the soil. The subterranean embers break through to the surface and flare back into megafires. The human and ecological toll this year is heavy. 4 people have tragically lost their lives, including 3 aircrew members who died when their waterbombing aircraft crashed in the Northwestern Territories late last month. Remote indigenous communities have had to flee under emergency evacuation orders, leaving thousands displaced as smoke chokes out towns and forces highway closures across the north. This brings us to a crucial question. If lightning and underground embers are the physical sparks, what role is climate change actually playing? Think of climate change as a force multiplier. It doesn't always pull the trigger, but it systematically loads the gun. High global temperatures lead to longer, more intense heat waves that sap moisture out of the soil and trees. What would have been a small, manageable spot fire 30 years ago can now blow up into an uncontrollable mega fire in a matter of hours. But there's another layer to this story that has come into sharp focus over the past year. A modern technological twist connecting our digital habits directly to the smoke outside our windows. The explosive growth of artificial intelligence and hyperscale data centers. You might ask, how does a data center thousands of miles away have anything to do with a wildfire in the Canadian wilderness? It comes down to the massive, insatiable energy and water footprint of the AI boom. Generative AI models require immense amount of electricity to run and millions of gallons of water to cool their servers. To meet this sudden surge in baseline power demand, utility companies across North America have delayed the retirement of fossil fuel plants and pushed local power grids to their absolute limits. Look at what happened during the devastating Southern California firestorm in January 2025, specifically the Palisades and Eaton fires. The Palisades fire burned over 23,000 acres, destroyed nearly 7,000 structures, caused $25 billion in damage, and took 12 lives. While the initial spark was traced to a rekindled brush fire, fanned by 100 miles per hour Santa Ana winds, and neighboring fires were ignited by failing power equipment. Investigators highlighted a broader systemic strain on the regional grid. In fact, the non-negotiable 24/7 power draw from data center clusters makes grid management during high wind events far more perilous. When utilities try to balance high energy loads against emergency safety shutdowns, overloaded electrical infrastructure in rural brush corridors can arc, spark, and trigger catastrophic wildfires. At the same time, the carbon footprint of keeping this digital infrastructure running accelerates the very warming trends, making forests in California and Canada dry enough to burn. We are consuming unprecedented planetary resources to compute answers to global problems, even as the hardware doing the computing places direct strain on environmental health. So where does that leave the millions of people living downwind? When a megafire burns in northwestern Ontario, the smoke rises high into the troposphere where jet streams carry it hundreds of miles. In mid-July 2026, the shifting weather fronts funneled a dense plume of wildfire smoke directly over southern Ontario, the US Midwest, and Northeast. In Toronto, Thunder Bay, New York, health agencies have issued emergency air quality alerts. Emergency rooms across these metro areas are seeing spikes in visits for acute respiratory distress, severe asthma attacks, and cardiovascular complications. The danger comes from PM 2.5 fine particulate matter less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter. These particles are small enough to bypass the cilia and mucus in your nose and throat, penetrating deep into the lungs and entering the bloodstream. Health officials emphasize that an orange sky shouldn't be treated as a social media photo op. It's a severe public health hazard. So, when the orange haze settles over your city, keep your windows sealed, run air purifiers with HEPA filters on high, and wear a well-fitted N95 mask if you must go outdoors. And then comes the million-dollar question. When will the skies clear? In the short term, weather shifts may bring temporary relief to parts of the Great Lakes and the Northeastern over the weekend, but for the northern communities near the fire front, the battle is far from over. Canada's wildfire season typically peaks in late July and runs through August and September. Fire agencies in both the US and Canada warn that elevated fire risks will persist across British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario until the first sustained winter snows arrive in late autumn. The 2026 fire season is a reminder that what happens in distant northern forests eventually reaches American cities and streets as well. The orange sky acts as a mirror, reflecting a warming planet, an increasingly strained energy grid, and the hidden environmental cost of our digital age. Stay safe, monitor your local air quality indexes, and join us next week as we continue to track forces shaping our changing world. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir Baig, signing off. Take good care of yourself.